Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tammy Chesworth, and I am the Family Court Services Manager for Riverside County. What that means is I oversee all the child custody recommending counselors in Riverside County. A little bit about what I've done for the courts is I did start as a CCRC, and I've worked in both Riverside and San Bernardino County. And I have also done child custody evaluations, which you heard Dr. Sharon talk about earlier. So when I spent my time in San Bernardino, I was able to do evaluations for Riverside County. So then when I came back to Riverside and became the supervisor, then the manager, you can't touch cases anymore. So that's my background. But I'm here I can answer any questions as a CCRC or as the manager. I'm ready.
Why can't we get contact? Oh, I'm sorry. Why can't we get contact with CPS through you anymore? We can't.
You can.
We can.
Yeah, I'll get when I get back. When I get back to that, then we'll talk again. Okay,
Good.
Carol.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. So I think we're all familiar with this couple, right? I think I mediated them when I started in the court. So a little thing about, CCRCs, we are not legal people whatsoever. I do actually have one who has an attorney background, but the rest of us are all mental health professionals. So their master's degrees are either in psychology or sociology. And several of us are licensed. I'm licensed. I have to be licensed to be in this position. I'm a marriage and family therapist. So that might help a little bit why we don't know the legal stuff, which is why we need our judges. But I am going to give you some of the major codes that kind of apply. So Family Code 3160 dictates that each court must make a mediator available. And as we discussed, it looks different in different counties. We have non-recommending counties, we have recommending counties, and now we have tiered counties. That they're starting a new trend with doing a tiered system, which takes a lot of staff to be able to do. So we don't have the kind of staff to do a tiered system, and I think our judges appreciate the the recommending piece that we do.
Oh, absolutely.
So Family Code 3161 is basically, it talks about the purpose of mediation is to effect a settlement. 3183, it authorizes us as mediators to make a recommendation to the court. 1815 talks about the CCRC qualifications, which, as I told you, the requirements are that they have a master's in a behavioral health, which is usually psychology, sociology, and that they have at least 2 years of clinical experience. So they have to have been a clinician, a therapist, something along those lines, postmasters. In our county, you don't and per the code, we don't have to be licensed clinicians, but in some counties they do require. In San Bernardino, they require it. So you will see variations across the state. California Rule of Court 5.210 is basically the CCRC standards of practice. Everything we do, we're pretty much, all of our stuff is in there, what guides us. And then 5.215 is the standards of practice in terms of domestic violence. So when my mediators get hired, they have to do 40 hours of general training about mediation and a minimum of 16 hours of domestic violence. Then, as you all know, you have to do CEUs. We have to do CEUs. So every year we have to do general education of 8 hours and 4 hours of domestic violence minimum every year. But they do more than that typically.
And that's a county requirement, not a...
That is per the code.
The code.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the mediation process specific to Riverside. So the CCRC appointment is set based on somebody filed an RFO or the court ordered it. That's how the mediation appointment gets set. We set the appointments a minimum of 10 court days prior to the associated hearing date. And the reason we do that is because we have to have time to mediate the parents, if we're going to interview children or not, to obtain collateral information if we need to contact CPS or we need to talk to a therapist or whatever. That's why we need that 10 days. Besides the fact that they're seeing, 3 appointments a day. They're scheduled for 3 appointments a day, so they need time to write all these reports that they do. So the notice is sent, the order to attend notice is sent to the parties based on whatever address we have. It's sent to the attorneys. And then the requirements are included on that. They're required by local rules to complete parent orientation, so that it's meant to set the foundation so that they know when they come in for the appointment what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about legal custody, physical custody, and so it's just like an overview. And then the questionnaire that we need finished ahead of time, preferably. Right now we're still doing video mediation because we don't have enough staff to do in person. And the other reason is, the risks keep going up and down, up and down. And although the hearings started in September in person, the hearings are different, right? You're in court and there's a gallery and the people are way far away from the staff. Well, when we do mediation, they're right there, up close and personal in a closed office for, 1-2 hours. So that's another reason why we're still doing the video. So it's very important that if you practice family law here too, that your clients get the notice, because it gives them very specific instructions on how to participate in the process. And we're using WebEx, so it tells them, how to do all of that. Prior to the appointment, we don't include any additional third parties or children at the CCRC appointment. So, in other counties that are non-recommending, they'll allow attorneys. We don't allow attorneys. Minors Counsel is an exception. We do also mediation for probate, and most of the time the minor counsel from probate does participate in the mediation. For minors counsel in regular mediation, usually they don't participate, but a lot of times they'll contact the mediator, or the mediator, will talk to them if needed. So that's kind of the process here. If children are ordered to be interviewed, they don't come at the normal mediation appointment time. We try to schedule children late in the afternoon, after school hours, and so that they're not exposed to what's going on in the court during the day, because there's a lot of drama that goes on. And I cover all the courthouses, and they all look different. And some of them are very up close and personal. And police, sometimes people are getting arrested. There's fights, all that. So we try to minimize the children's exposure, which is why, even though it gets ordered, we don't want the children there during the normal mediation hours. So on the day of the appointment, we do give a grace period for people to check in, because we know that if you're coming into Larson, for example, and you have jury lines that are around the corner, it takes time for them to get in. We do have a process in place, which we'll have to remember when we go back to in person, to kind of call people out of line if they have a mediation, to get them up there so they're not late. And then right now we're doing the same thing for the phone, because we have hundreds of people calling at any given time. So the mediation call center is all in Riverside. So every 8 o'clock appointment in the whole county has to call there, and then it get funneled to where it's supposed to go. So we also give a grace period for that reason. Once both parties have checked in, then their case is assigned to the CCRC. So, I think a lot of people think the mediators know their cases ahead of time. They're researching them like judges. No. It's like, okay, it's 8:15, here's your case. Okay? So they have about 15 to 20 minutes to prep for the session. And that's very important, because when we have the people on the first slide, our frequent filers who are here every 6 months, you can imagine how, and people get upset. Well, didn't you read my case? Yeah, no, I didn't read your whole case. We didn't have time. So what they're going to focus on is the current orders, the current filing and current responses. So they're going to look at all the current stuff, right? And then later, they definitely go back. If Dr. Sheeran did an eval, we're going to look at that. Was there a 3027? I'm going to look at that. Was there other mediations? I'm going to look at all of that after. So if applicable, the CCRC also reviews related cases. So we usually will do some sort of name search and go, okay, now I see you guys came back here. You were here 2 years ago for a DV. You have a family law. Oh, you have a DISO. That's what the mediator is doing when they're prepping for the case. Because then we got to make notes for the judge. So the judge knows, oh, we got all these cases out there and none of them are consolidated. So they're doing that. They're calling CPS. So we have a court order between Riverside County CPS and family law, Riverside County family law, where we are able to share information between the social workers and the CCRCs. So if in the questionnaire they check the box that, yeah, I have CPS, we're calling CPS before we even bring them in the office. Because do they have an open case? Do they have a laundry list of history? Do they have cases in all over the state? Because when we call CPS, CPS has one statewide system. So when we call, we're getting the history for the whole state of California. So even though we're Riverside County, we can get the referrals that happened in San Bernardino or Orange County, or so, and we put that all in the report. Does that answer your question? Because you had a question.
Great.
Okay.
My question though was, how does Minors Counsel get CPS information? Up until maybe a year ago, there was a liaison.
Oh.
I think it was Emma Linda. I'm not sure. And she contacted CPS, and this went on for what, 7 or 10 years. And then then attorneys and Minors Counsel were able to get CPS information, and I didn't mind signing confidentiality or whatever we had to do to get it, but we were able to get CPS information through the mediation liaison so that we all knew it before we went to court. And right now, like Dr. Sheeran is desperately trying to get somebody at CPS to give him information. I'm Minors Counsel. He keeps calling me, and it's like,
that's funny because we met with all the evaluators and we explained the process for them to get the information. I'm the one who provides CPS with the list.
It wasn't Emma Linda. It was not.
Yeah, it probably wasn't.
No, I don't think it was. But in other words, when you get the information, we're asking, can you get it to us or can you share it with us?
But do any of you remember who that was?
Judge Wells would know.
Well, he's trying to rack his brain over here. Because I've been here since 2009, and I don't know who.
What was going on? They could contact. Maybe I should say the court had a CPS liaison.
That's
I'm not sure that worked for Minors Counsel.
It was.
It did.
It
oh,
was.
Yeah, we got information from CPS through the court liaison all the time.
Well,
do you want me to ask Pam Thomas who it was?
Good.
Well, we did. We
Yeah, we can communicate about it and figure that out because
it would really help.
There's a list that I provide to CPS of who the mediators are because we have that court order, and then they also have a list of who the evaluators are, so that they there's a whole release they have to sign and stuff though, so it's a little different process for the evaluators. But we can definitely look into that and troubleshoot it and figure it out.
Important. And I have one more question. It seems to me right now, maybe I'm jumping ahead of you, but it seems to me right now that the CPS people are not necessarily contacting the counselors. That used to happen more often, like if Diana's on the case or somebody's on the case. Those contacts are not happening as often. Do they have discretion to do that? How do you decide when they...
You mean when you say counselors, you mean you all, or you mean my people?
No, I mean your people doing a mediation, and then they hear that these people have been working with maybe Diana Harrington or Kim Phillips or whoever.
Yeah.
And the contacts out to them aren't happening as frequently as they used to.
They don't happen as frequently, and part of that is probably because back in the day, we've all been here a long time. Back in the day, we used to have mediator consistency. So when that old couple we saw came and I saw them, and they come back, I'm getting them again, and I'm getting them again, until they complain about me, and then I get to toss them over to somebody else. But we don't do that anymore. We just like the day of, we do a rotation of who's up first. You know, who got a case? Oh, you're up next, and it just goes like that. So there's not that. So when the social workers call, they don't necessarily know who it's going to. So they do. Sometimes they'll call me, and then I'll get the information, and whoever gets assigned to, I give them the information. And then you have to understand that CPS is very deficient of social workers right now too. There's just like all of us, right? So you're not seeing the veteran social workers who kind of know how the whole process rolls. You're seeing a lot of, I think they told me like 55% of their staff are new.
But my question is, the recommending counselor, whoever picks up
Uh-huh.
the case, don't they have the discretion to call a private counselor who's been working with the case?
The social worker?
No.
Or the counsel? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, because
Minors
that's
counsel.
not,
No,
I'm
not
not talking
my
minors counsel, I'm talking about like,
the
say
family
Kim
therapist.
Phillips or somebody
Yeah.
who's been working with the family. That is not happening as often as it used to.
Where they call the social worker?
No,
When they call
no,
me.
no.
When
They
they
call
call
a
me.
family
Like,
therapist.
Like I'm in private practice, but I have a lot, I'm on the list for co-parenting, let's say.
Oh yeah, we rarely do that. We rarely do that. We're doing more if it's in order to avoid interviewing the child. We'll talk to the therapist. But we're getting a lot of pushback from the parents because we do the release of information. They're like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then we get another party goes, oop, talk to my attorney. He said not to sign it. So we're getting a lot of pushback from the parents and not wanting, because we can't just willy-nilly call, right? We need the release. And where some of that tie-up is happening is getting the release back from the
So
parents.
a court order would be sufficient rather than a release.
No, we still need the release for the therapist. The therapist needs to have that release of information on their record.
I think they do.
They do,
I know.
and I had one recently, and they still refused to sign it.
Well, the court could order them, yeah.
Or they could
to
order an
sign.
Eliza to sign, I suppose.
They could order the parties to sign. The court could order the parties to
Yeah.
sign.
Order the parties to sign, and you can enforce that order if necessary by contempt.
Or an Eliza, right? Can you not use
Yeah, you could have an Eliza, you could do that. If
And
you
it-
sign, I wanna have courts-
And I
courts sign it.
think that
Just bring them in.
I think the other exactly my other comment to that is, why aren't the parents having the therapist write something for the court? Why are what you know what it
Won't do that.
if we have to work around?
Sometimes when
I
you
can
see
answer that.
Other reasons.
Yeah, you could.
Liability.
No, but
Lose our
sometimes
license.
they've been in a couple of times, and there've been some very capable people working with that family, and I think they could get a quicker read on the situation if they made that call.
See, they're
And
not,
it's happening less often.
they're not allowed to write recommending anything. if they
No,
don't-
not recommendations. Sometimes all we're wanting is like, yes, they've been seen. This is how many times they've been seen. Maybe they have a diagnosis. We're working with the family, just like a summary of kind of the sessions and what's.
We can't do that unless the court requests it,
But
and we have
people
signed
sign-
releases.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to have both parents, because what happens, because our board's really strict about it, you can imagine.
Yes.
People come to therapy, we want her to have therapy. No, they don't want her to have therapy. They want me to write a letter to the court.
Right.
And the court has not asked about saying how bad dad is. Or
Right.
how bad,
Right.
you know, and so we don't do that.
Right.
The one who wants the letter is the one who's going to be benefited by the letter.
Well, that's another thing that varies across the county, because there are therapists who do write things, and there are therapists who make recommendations, and we're like, whoa, what's going on?
Definitely not okay.
It's not okay, but it all boils down to, did we get the release for us to talk to the therapist? Because trust me, they do ask, because we're trying to keep the child out of the conflict, so we don't want to bring the child in and let me as a professional talk to the other professional and kind of ferret it out. But we're getting a lot of pushback from the parents is what's happening. So it's not that they didn't try necessarily. That's kind of what's been going on lately. So we left off on, we're getting CPS history. The other thing we're looking up is criminal history. Because of the law code, There's certain criminal offenses that definitely impact custody and visitation. So are there safety issues? Does somebody have multiple DUIs? Is there a criminal protective order in place? All that impacts custody and visitation. So that's another area that we're looking up, is the criminal history.
Now, are your CCRCs familiar with the difference between a no contact and a no negative contact criminal protective order?
So here's what the CCRCs look up. They do see the no contact versus the no negative contact. They're looking for box 16 to be checked.
That's the one.
That's the one.
Okay, all right. I want to make sure they're checking that out.
They are.
That's the difference between, well, it's not the only difference, but that box 16 is the key.
That's the key. So that's what they're trained to look for. It doesn't preclude them from making a recommendation, but if it's not checked, they're going to make the judge aware, because the judge then will tell them to go to criminal court and take care of that or whatever they're going to do. So that's what we do on our end. It doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We're just going to say, hey, judge, this box 16 is not checked.
You're welcome to give this person custody, but if you do understand they're going to go to jail.
Exactly. The other thing we're looking at is if they had a juvenile case, we're looking up the juvenile case. If they had a probate related probate, we can, yeah. So we're looking up all, remember, we're still at 15, 20 minutes, but we're looking up all this stuff, right? So that questionnaire for us is key, because that just has just a wealth of information on it. It tells...
I'm sorry.
Go
can
ahead.
you look up juvenile cases out of county too, or no? It's just for Riverside. You can only access.
It's just for Riverside County, and then we can look up some stuff in other counties, like Orange County, for example. You can look up stuff if you have the case number. In San Bernardino County, you can look up stuff. So you can look up family law stuff, and you can look up criminal stuff. Juvenile, no, because that's highly confidential. So only in our county can we pull up the juvenile. So we are thoroughly researching before we've even started. This is what they're doing. Okay, so now during the session, each parent's asked to express what they're requesting in terms of custody and visitation, because we all know it changes every step of the way, right? They file the RFO and I want 50-50. Then they come to mediation, they go, no, let's do a split week. And then they go to court and they're like, well, I didn't want that, I want this. So it changes every step of the way. So the RFO they file, then we look at their questionnaire, and it might say something different, and so we just verify. Okay, just let me verify, what is it you're requesting in terms of custody and visitation at the beginning of the session. Safety concerns are always addressed, always throughout the session. I mean, it's from the time we start until they're leaving. We see how they're interacting. So you can imagine that as mental health professionals, it's very difficult to read people the way we were able to when they're sitting in our office. Because they'll walk in the session, grab the chair and move it all the way to the other side and go like this. We're like, oh, okay, we know how this is going.
Oh, you mean when I used to walk in?
When they were in person. But now they're on video, and they're not very well behaved necessarily on video. They're in their own comfort zone, right? They're very comfortable. They're wearing things they probably shouldn't be wearing sometimes, and it's a whole different environment versus being in person.
My client came in one time and she said, the CCRC recommending counselor made him, the husband, take his iPad and skim it around the room to show where he was and
Yep.
who he was with.
Yep.
He was in his attorney's office.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yes. We have had, at the very beginning, we had a lot of people logging in, and we're like, that's an attorney's email address. And we would do that. And we do that when we interview children, too. We make them scan the room because we want to see who's in the room. It's very difficult, though, if you have this, right? If you have a desktop, how are we going to scan the room? And there's all kinds of atrocities that have been happening, but we'll save that for later if we have time. And then we summarize the session. We do that kind of continually through the session. Okay, so I think that this is where you're at. This is where you're at. Is that correct? Anybody want to make any adjustments? So we do that kind of throughout when we summarize what's going on. And we may or may not share with them what we're going to recommend.
Well, and I've had clients who call me and say, the mediator hated me, or the mediator loved me, and I'm like, I always say to my clients, you cannot tell. First of all, mediators act like devil's advocates half the time. The other half of the
That's
time,
their job.
you are so tunnel vision about what's going on in there.
Yeah.
I'll see the report.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And then we'll schedule the children interview. Like if during the mediation we decide, okay, I'm going to talk to little Johnny, I'll go ahead and schedule it right then and there. We'll say, okay, let's go ahead and schedule it. If they decide after the mediation, then the clerk will schedule it for them because it can't communicate with the parents once the mediation's over because ex parte.
Which is different because in San Bernardino, I've heard clients say differently that they call, because if there's domestic violence, they won't do it at the same time. They'll call, and call again. So
Yes.
there's this sort of ex parte weirdness that's happening.
No, you can do that with separate DV.
Okay.
Because I used to do that in San Bernardino too. So I'd meet with the one parent, and then I met with the other parent, and what they're doing is they're doing shuttle mediation, right? They're going back and forth.
Doing it different times though now.
Yeah, they
totally different days.
they
different
do
times.
that in
Oh,
San
okay.
Bernardino. They schedule them at different times and different days. And they can do the phone call because they've already done it separately. And you'll see in the reports that they were met separately.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of covered because the overlying thing is, it's a safety issue, which allows them to do that. So then we're gonna review anything. So sometimes they'll check no CPS, no criminal, and then during the session, well, he's got 2 DUIs and stuff will come up, right? Then we're like, oh, that's interesting. And then we're looking it up. So then we're again reviewing whatever else in the case file we need to review. Maybe now we got to call CPS. Maybe now we got to look up these other criminal things or juvenile or whatever. So that's what we're doing after the session too.
Let me suggest something. From a judicial officer perspective, it's really important that you guys do that because we can't research.
I just got done. I'm so glad you said that, Your Honor, because I have 2 new mediators I'm training.
Yeah.
And I just had that conversation with, well, the judge is going to look it up. Nope, let me correct you. They cannot look that up. They're depending on us to find that stuff.
That's right.
So it's very important.
But you guys, don't you in Riverside have the equivalent of the CII, which gives you a background on the crimes that they've done? So in San Bernardino, the judicial officers get, I can't remember what CII stands for right now.
On a DV, we would get that.
Mhm.
I
Not on
never
a
got it on
custody.
anything except the DV.
That's
Only
interesting because
DV.
in San Bernardino they get a CII on every case that involves
They do.
custody
I'm
visitation.
surprised I've gone there and I've had,
That's crazy.
blah, blah,
I
blah,
didn't
and
know
the
that
judge,
about
you know,
Riverside.
Well, and I will tell you, back in the day again, the mediators used to get CLETs on DV stuff, or we could ask for it. We're like, oh, now they're talking about DV, we would get it. When I worked in San Bernardino, every mediation I did that had DV, they would give it to me. But CLETs is a pretty narrow margin of what you're supposed to and what you're allowed to and not allowed to do. And I would say in Riverside County, we're very by the book. And they are not allowed to, unless there's a DV, correct?
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then lastly, case consultation. So the mediators will consult. So maybe during the session, I go, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I tell them, like, I'm going to consult with a couple of my colleagues because I'm not quite sure what to do with your situation. And it's actually mandated for us to consult per California Rule of Court 5.210. And it's to check for bias, right? Because we all have a bias. If you say you don't have one, you're lying. Or you're not being aware of it, but it's very important for my staff. I always tell them, what's your bias? Make sure you know what your bias is, and if you know what it is, I'll say, for example, narcissistic men kind of trigger me. So if I get a case like that, that's the one I'm definitely consulting. Even though I think I'm being all balanced, I'm going to go, you know what, this guy kind of pushed my buttons. Please read this for me, or that sort of thing. So my staff will consult. When we're in person, we do more of a formal, like I'll go to each location every month and we'll do it. But since we're COVID, we'll do it over the phone. We'll Zoom. It doesn't have to be me. It could be just the colleagues with each other. So that's required. Yes, Carol.
I just wanted to say, I've had CCRC in Riverside call me as minors counsel
Yes.
and get my input and ask questions. I may have had one from Indio call me over all these years, and I think it would be really great if they would routinely talk to minors counsel, because, you know, like, I don't think you were here yet this morning, you know, I'm hearing from my child why she's suicidal and all that kind of stuff, and the parents are only fighting over the kid. And so I think, you know, CCRC can get some valid information.
I think so. Part of that problem for us is California Rule of Court 5.235, I believe. It has to be expressed like in the minutes that we're authorized to talk to minors counsel. We can't just like pick up the phone and do that, I believe.
I think what it says also is that that the minors counsel can interview the mediator. So a lot of times mediators don't feel comfortable being the one
Right.
contacting and providing information. If
Yeah.
they're not being
But see, we
interviewed.
don't always get notice of mediation, that's the problem.
But you don't have to appear at the mediation, but you can call the mediator.
We don't even know if there is mediation.
You should be
sometimes.
getting notice of the mediation.
Because we're appointed afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
So you
you're
can
right.
see who the mediator is.
No,
when
I
you get
know,
to the
but when you're appointed after the people have been to mediation, and the mediation says, this case needs minors counsel, there's no time to go back and have any input with mediation at all.
Well,
know,
couldn't
it's-
you,
Just send it back to mediation.
couldn't you work with Judge Gerard, the family law judges, so that the referral to minors counsel includes a paragraph
That
that says
also,
that that the
Yeah.
CCRC may contact minors counsel?
yeah.
Something
I
like
don't
that?
think you're really supposed to have input though. I think you're just supposed to
It's
give
not
your.
input, but
Yeah.
you know, like there are cases where it's really important for CCRC not to hear just the parents, because
Right.
you're
But
not
I
gonna,
don't think
you're not
they're
gonna get to the
supposed
best
to.
interest of the child if that child is suicidal
it's-
because da-da-da or da-da-da.
I'll tell you what I do, I try to get my minors counsel report in
Right.
before they have the mediation.
We love that.
I know, I saw.
Love
that. I
it,
got
love it.
Quoted, and I can frame it.
Oh.
But I-
You know, I can see
The
a problem.
timing is, the
Yeah.
timing just is.
I can
right.
see a problem with ex parte communication.
But so
Mhm.
that's what I do, and then then the other thing we can do in our recommendation is say that they should go back to mediation, cause there's some other information that they need to.
Remember,
hear.
minors counsel can be proactive. Minors counsel, the Metzger case is a really good example of a minors counsel that was proactive. She took an appeal. I mean,
I know.
so that took a writ, I think. So anyway, that's something that you guys could do if you felt like there was a need for something. You could, file an RFO for a remediation, something like that.
Or put it in your report because there's a hearing coming up anyway and ask them to
Could do
continue.
that.
And I've seen that. It was probably yours that I saw. And some things had changed. And guess what? When they came to mediation, some more things had changed again. So I do, yeah, we love those reports.
I think you can also get a stipulation by the parties, but it has to be by stipulation that they consent to the ex parte communication.
Yeah, I think,
That's too risky.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
just as soon have the parents not know, we're going everywhere and everywhere and everywhere just to get information, but, sometimes it's been interesting when CCRC has said to me, what the kids told you is exactly the opposite of what they said here.
That's
And the
happened.
lady in Riverside told me that.
Mm-hmm.
And when the whole case came out and everything, I don't know who took them to CCRC, but whichever parent took them, that's what they said,
They got coached.
obviously.
And that's
Imagine
happened.
that.
How unusual.
Imagine that.
So I just sometimes like to know what kids say there
Mhm.
as much as what they say to me, because it's really, eye-opening sometimes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. I don't know if I helped you so much, but we're taking notes. Okay, so what do we consider as mediators when we're doing the parenting plan? First and foremost is always safety. So is there any domestic violence? And that isn't necessarily just between the parents. Is it between mom and her new boyfriend or dad and his new woman or whoever? Is there child abuse? Is there history of CPS? Is there substance abuse? The ages of the children and what developmental stage they're at and what are their needs? What is it the children need for this to work? The children's temperament, kind of like what's their personality like? Are they able to like transition back and forth? Or are they an anxious kid? All of our kids are anxious now, right? Because of COVID and everybody's online, people and all that, right? The children's attachment and bond with their parents and siblings in each home. They might be attached to stepmom, stepdad, step siblings, half siblings. They might have grandmas, cousins, who knows, living in the home. So that we take that into consideration too. And then the children's schedule. What are their school hours? Are they in any extracurricular activities? Are they involved in church things? That, we need to consider all of that when we're making a parenting plan, because the parents need to be on board with taking little Johnny to his karate on Tuesday and Thursdays. Okay, make sure we remember that. Are they in daycare or after school care, and is that required? Are they getting government assistance on that, where the child is actually required to be there a certain number of hours a day, or there's certain days of the week they have to be there? So that's a lot, and I don't think people think about the kids' schedule. They focus more on mom and dad, but kids have stuff going on too. So where do each parent live? Where do they work? And what are their work or school schedules? Some of them are really young and still in school, or older and going back to school. So we need to consider all of that when we're talking about custody and visitation. And what are the child's ties to the community? Again, what activities are they in? Are they in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts? And parents live in 2 different communities. All of that kind of stuff comes into play. Additional family members at both homes, like I said. The level of acrimony between the parents. Do I have to come up with a parallel parent situation where each parent has their own time and they just really don't intermingle? Or do they get along really well and we could do like more exchanges more frequently, kind of thing? Providing a consistent, simple, and predictable schedule with smooth transitions between the homes. That's ideal for any child, right? Ensuring frequent and continuing contact with both parents, and again, keeping in mind if there's safety issues involved or not. Is there a hidden agenda? So, have I never wanted to see little Johnny? Now he's 8, because there's a child support action that got filed over here that I found that says now you have to pay $1,200, and all of a sudden he's an RFO and I need 50-50. So those are cases, we're looking up those cases. Okay, now, special considerations would be, do we need supervised visitation? And if we do, what kind? Are we doing professional or non-professional? Therapeutic visitation. We typically recommend therapeutic visitation if we have a disrupted relationship for some reason. Maybe a parent got incarcerated and was gone for 3 years, but had a relationship prior to going, and now we just need to reestablish that. Or do we have a kid who's refusing to go see the other parent, and why? And they're not telling, and they're not talking, they're not telling the mediator, right? So we need therapy to go on. Or no visitation. Those are pretty extreme and very rare. You're very rarely going to see my staff or the judges do no visitation. Do we need an evaluation? So we have our 3111, our 3118, our 730. So a 3111 you're more often going to see when, say, the parents are sharing equally, lived in the same community, kids get along, everybody's doing great, and now all of a sudden someone's moving out of state. Uh-oh. And we try to weigh all the factors as mediators. We do look at the la mouche, move away factors, but if it goes beyond like what we need to look at, like, oh, they want to compare schools, and we got to talk to the new wife, and there's a lot more to be done, we're going to recommend an eval. 3118, we rarely recommend those, but those tend to come up more if, say, for example, mom's new husband has to register as a sex offender. Oh. And we're like, ooh, is that person a risk to this child? We need an evaluator to look at it.
Well, if he's got to register as a sex offender in California, a child can't live in that residence.
Right, which is why we need the eval, because we're like, oh, what do we do? Maybe he's already been living there for 5 years before they came to us, right? So now we need someone else to look at it deeper. And then a 730, in our county, when we say we want a 730, we're wanting psych testing. And it's because we were dealing with the frequent filers, and we suspect as clinicians there's probably some mental health, personality disorder stuff going on. So when you see a mediator say we want a 730, that's where we're at. We're suspecting there's some underlying mental health conditions with the parents. We're not usually as concerned with the children, as Dr. Sharon said. the children sometimes need it, but it's more about the parents, because we're like, look, these guys have been coming here for 10 years and the kid's only 10. So what do we need to do?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Sorry to keep butting in.
No, that's what I'm here for.
There's been two at 7:30 and then an updated 7:30 in the past.
Yes.
And now time has gone by, so there's a change of circumstance. Does CCRC consider maybe another update to the?
Yeah, we do. We most typically would want it to be the same evaluator if possible, but sometimes the evaluator is like, I'm done with those people. And so they have to pick a new one. But we would consider, like, we need to update it. I tell the judges and my staff, like, once they've gone down 730 Road, sending them back to mediation usually is not, it stays on that road until the life of their case. And
I have
then,
a couple of questions.
Sure.
You know that normally when we order a 7:30, it isn't, the testing, the psychiatric testing is not automatic. It goes to somebody like Diana or Carol or somebody else, and then they kind of make the decision if the extra psychiatric testing is needed. I mean, do you understand, do you guys know that? I mean, technically the 7:30 is psychological and broad, but not necessarily testing.
so the difference between the 3111 and the 730 is that a 730 requires an expert, which is a psychologist or higher that can read the testing.
Yes.
So that's why I'm telling you, in our county, when we say 730,
Okay.
this is how I translate it. And I will tell you that we have worked on updating the form, the referral that goes to the evaluator, that's way more specific, because I'm like, well, what is this thing? It's not telling them what we want them to look at, just like Dr. Sheeran was saying. So we have updated the form. It's just in the final steps.
I have a question. I want just to repeat. You said the 3111 requires?
No.
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
No.
730.
No.
Well,
And so what we were finding is we were referring for 3111, and everybody's getting psych tests, and we're like, we don't need that. Why are you? And they're paying $8,000. Like, we don't need that. We only need you to address the move away. So we did just update that form. It's not finalized yet, but we also added the Sanchez waiver
Oh, you
as a
did.
check box.
What
Yeah.
do you do when you don't sign the Sanchez waiver?
What do
If
we
you
do?
don't- the attorneys
You
won't
have to
sign it?
ask the judicial officer
Well,
here
no,
what
for
happens
you
with
guys,
that.
though, do you guys still
We don't
use
even
that
s-
information?
we
You
don't even see it.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't see
Just
that.
send it.
Yeah.
Because it creates a kind of a mess.
Do you guys ever recommend minors counsel, or is that?
Yeah, I'm getting to it.
Oh,
Sorry,
I will.
Wait, can I ask one more?
I
question?
will.
So you guys will look at, and I'm sorry I missed the moment, but you guys do look at the 730s? You can get.
Yeah.
But if you don't know if there's actually a Sanchez waiver for that 730 or not, you won't.
We wouldn't know.
So you use the information in the 730, and it may or may not have a Sanchez waiver for your reports to help assist you writing the reports.
Yeah, we wouldn't know if there was a Sanchez waiver or not.
That's a fascinating legal issue.
Not. See, and I'm not a legal person. Disclaimer.
No, but really, do you
Yeah.
know why? Do you know why? It's like a 30-second explanation, if you care.
No, you can. Well,
I don't know if you
we're
can.
on
Well,
speaker
because
too,
the
so
Sanchez waiver, it's a hearsay issue.
yeah.
And so once the hearsay it's not in, but yet you're relying on it as part of your recommendation. So it's almost an and you guys can rely on hearsay, right, for your recommendations, and you do, but it also leads to sort of,
well, it's from a case-specific hearsay.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but, and listen, I've gotten lots of 730s that are double hearsay, triple hearsay,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they come to a conclusion, and you're like, how'd you get that? Good luck in court, so.
Have you ever run into anyone in Riverside County who has made an issue of a Sanchez waiver on a
Oh, yeah.
730?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, and so Your Honor, I will specifically, particularly when I know there's certain evaluators, I will not name names, certain evaluators that do a poor job of their evaluations, and I know that if I'm not going to know who the evaluators, I will not give a Sanchez waiver because I want them to come in. Because the problem that you have is how reliable is what they're relaying, right? Because I don't care if it's hearsay, really, it's how reliable is that information that's coming in. And I've seen it on the stand time after time with certain evaluators. You bring in the person who actually said it, and the reporter is not reporting accurately. And it's intrinsically different. So they're taking their bias, and they're getting to a conclusion at the end based on what they're thinking the person is saying, but it's not even close. So,
You may want to think about, like when I was doing evaluation,
yeah.
whenever I wrote that section in my collaterals and wrote it, I would send it to whoever it was and said, is this accurate?
I wish they would. And the
And
particular evaluators.
And see, when I do a minors
I
counsel
always
report,
did that.
I require if I'm gonna have a hearsay, I require them to file a declaration under penalty of perjury, and then that can go with my minors counsel report. But anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay. No, I love it.
You got all the time you want.
Thank you.
And
then
this YouTubing thing really fits you. Just like, yeah.
I don't like it.
I don't like
Stop! Now you're making me blush. Okay, then the CPS, we kind of already got into that earlier, that we have the court order, so we're able to get the information. And then a 3027 investigation. Typically for CCRCs, we're going to recommend a 3027 when these people are a huge hot mess. They've been in and out of CPS, and here they are again with the same issue. And maybe we think the family would be best served by an investigation where they can gather all these pieces, and maybe they have stuff in San Bernardino and Orange County, and we don't have access to that, right? We only can have access to Riverside, and we're like, hey, look, they got this thing going on over there and that thing going on over there. Let's get our CPS to do the investigation, because then they can talk to the other counties and get the other information and pull it together. So that's one of the main reasons that we'll recommend a 3027. We're not going to do it if, like, oh, they have an open referral. Big deal. I'll call and find out what the outcome is, that sort of thing.
And do you find that the 3027s, because I found them actually be quite good.
Yes.
Do you find them as a CCRC, does your staff find them to be quite good? Better, because CPS, let's be honest, true CPS investigations are not very thorough half the time. 3027s, though, they do an amazing job.
Yeah, we do find them extremely helpful. The only part we kind of take with a grain of salt is their recommendation at the end, where like, can be safely maintained, maintained.
Right.
That's what you have to remember when they say that, is that means this situation didn't rise to the level of welfare and institution codes to intervene.
Right.
That doesn't translate the same for us, because you're saying, oh, who's that guy he was talking about earlier that smokes marijuana 24/7, and that's not really an issue. It is for us, right? So that's the part we kind of make our own opinion about, but definitely the content, of course, we love it. It's almost like a free eval, right?
It's good to know about that conclusion, though.
Yes.
I've wondered about that a million times.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah, fun fact, I worked at CPS too, so I speak
did?
CPS.
What
Do your,
CPS does.
do your CCRCs get CPS just general training so they kind of know or have a...
It's interesting because we all come from very different backgrounds. Several of my CCRCs have CPS experience, and so one of the things when we all get to know each other, even though we're across the county, is like, hey, where have you been? Oh, we got someone did juvenile probation. We got someone who did, and you know who your resources are. And if you get a case like that, then that's who you tap into, just like you all do, right? Yeah.
We do.
And then, of course, we're considering if there's domestic violence, and then children interviews, which I'll get into more later. You're all familiar with the power and control wheel, right? And domestic violence, a pattern of abusive behavior in relationship that's used to gain or maintain control over someone else. So the typical types, physical, emotional, sexual, verbal, that sort of thing. Reproductive coercion, that's more of a newer term. Are they taking your birth control, not letting you have birth control, poking holes in the condoms?
Does that really happen? I hate Sunny, but that really happens?
Yeah, it does. It does. Are they forcing you? Yes. That's why it's on. That's why I included it. Yay! It has been added. Forcing someone to have an abortion, forcing them to become pregnant by destroying their birth control and that sort of thing. Financial, I think we all know that. Economic deprivation or controlling the money or the assets. And then digital, I think we all kind of know about that too now. We got stalking, monitoring, revenge porn, all those, these little cell phone computers are scary. We have people hiding it in the car of the person so they could track them. They get really savvy. And then in terms of how DV plays out in CCRC, I kind of told you earlier, so we're constantly assessing. Do we get someone at the window going, I need to have separate, like, oh, he's here and I'm scared. So we'll kind of like separate them right away. In the session, we're monitoring if they're together. Maybe we're going to see them separate because of the DV based on, what they want. They have to request if they want separate or not, and sometimes they won't request, and then we still will have a side chat with them like, I see there's a restraining order, or we can do separate. Sometimes a mediator will separate them in the session if they kind of see some stuff that they're not liking. And then maybe we need to have a deputy escort one of the parties out to their vehicle. Maybe we'll, if we do shuttle mediation where we're having them separate in the building, when we do in the building, is maybe we'll release the alleged victim first so that they can leave. And then maybe we don't even have questions for the other person, but we're holding them like we do, right? Just to give them time to leave. So exactly. So that's a lot of the techniques that we'll use. Right now, since we're doing video, you all know how Zoom works, and you can put people in the lobby and that sort of thing. So they still do separate on video too. And then we typically, just so you know, we typically start with the moving party, because that's why they're there. So we start with the moving party, unless there had to be some sort of extreme situation where we're like, let me start with this guy, get this guy out of here, or this girl, whoever, you know what I mean. All right, so these are the different effects that domestic violence can have on children. Depression, aggression, delinquency, poor adjustment, early marriage or pregnancy, violence in romantic relationship, nightmares, night terrors, all these kind of things. And I'm not sure if you all as attorneys are familiar with the ACE study, but I know the clinicians in the room are. It's a adverse childhood experiences study that Kaiser did, San Diego Kaiser, as a matter of fact, back in 1995 to 1997. And they had a series of questions. I think I put it on your last page of your handout, what the questions are. And it's a series of questions that asks about experiences for your first 18 years of life. And if you want to preview some of those questions, the higher the score, so the more you say yes to, then the higher the risk of social and health problems later in life, right? Because we said, why is Kaiser doing it? Because they found that people ended up with cancer and heart disease and things related to, based on the risks that they had as children. So they started asking these types of questions. So that's why we care as a society what's happening to the children.
Do you guys ever discuss this with the people you're in CCRC with?
It's
to try to, I know your job's to mediate, but also to
we do. Yes, we do. So, we have about an hour and a half with the parties once we get them on and everything, and we've done our prep and all that. The time slots are 2-hour period, right? But we give them that league time to check in. We're reviewing their case, so usually about an hour and a half. So if we have the type of case where, we're definitely providing psychoeducation. Like, hey, look, maybe you need to know how your relationship is affecting your child. And they have to be amenable to it. Because if they're in there and they're just, So, we definitely, that is a piece of what we do. So domestic violence in terms of parenting plans. So what are we considering? Okay, so say we have a DV case, whether there's a restraining order or not, but we know there's DV in this family. We're going to consider, should we do day visits? Should we do non-professionally supervised, professionally supervised? We always start with, if they want supervised, we always start with, can we do non-professional? And it's not simply because of the money. It's also because of the child. Like, okay, we have this stranger who's going to be at your visit. It's weird, right? Versus if it's someone they know, it's more comfortable for them. Supervised exchanges, do we need to consider that? And we're very specific in the parenting plans in terms of exchange days and times. So you're going to see designated weekends, right? You're not going to see alternate weekends. No, because if law enforcement has to get involved, they don't know whose weekend it is. So my staff are going to do designated weekends. We'll probably have some sort of designated communication app. And you should not see anything in our parenting plan that says by mutual agreement. because you're putting the victim in the position of trying to negotiate with the perp, right?
By law, you can't do it anyway, by law.
Right. So that's why I'm saying you shouldn't see it, right? Hopefully you don't. And then I think Natalie told me there was a question earlier about the communication applications and that there's prices involved, the parenting apps.
Oh, yeah.
So I just redid the whole website for Family Court Services. On the, y'all know where our court's website is. So under divisions, if you select Family Court Services, all my information in there is all current. All the forms are there. And I just updated all the service provider lists. So your anger management, your parenting, co-parenting, and I updated this one too. So there's...
Do you have that sheet that
Yeah.
Kim gave us?
Yeah. Here.
So there's a new list.
Did you?
He did a comparison of Our Family Wizard and Talking Parents.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch more I
Well,
listed.
I know, but between those two, it looks like, people think that one is free and the other one's not.
Yeah.
And the reality is
You're right.
one costs more.
Yeah, because that was smart marketing, right? It's free. No, it's not. There's another one on there that's newer that's free right now, I'll say. So I just updated that. So if you want to pull that up and kind of explore those, because Natalie brought that to my attention. Thank you.
So were you going to post that one, Carol, on your?
We can send that out on the family law, to all the family law attorneys if you want.
I just didn't know if I was taking your only copy away.
Oh,
No, I can send that to Carolyn Martino, she's the one that
Okay, all
does
right.
okay. And then the other thing is, a lot of parents want to exchange at the police station. We're not big fans of that as clinicians because we're like, okay, we want little Johnny to remember my parents were so horrible that we had to go to the police station to get exchanged. On the other hand, there are times we do that for sure, but we more prefer a public location with lots of traffic and cameras. So like a gas station, somewhere easy on and off. Yeah. So that.
Just so you know, as a practitioner, and I appreciate that. I do want them to have as much normalized life as possible, but it is almost impossible when you have someone to try and get the videos from those places. Because as you know, the perpetrator, DV, always says, I didn't do anything to her. Shove her?
Yeah.
And I was in public. Why would I have done that? So,
And the other thing about police stations is sometimes there's nobody there.
Right.
yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's closed.
Haven't particularly. Yeah.
Or the one down there.
Yeah, it's closed. Okay, so child interviews. When do we interview kids? And at what age and how is it weighted? Those are some of the questions that, thank you, Diana, for providing me the information to provide today. So we're not usually interviewing kids, 5 and under. It's pretty even rare for us to do like even a 6-year-old or 7-year-old. And when do we decide? I mean, generically, I could just tell you if mom's saying black and dad's saying white and they both look like they're credible and you're like, I don't know, I don't have any corroborating evidence this way or that way, I'm gonna have to talk to the kid, find out what's really going on, right? And then how is it weighted? So that's kind of gonna depend on the kid. Are we talking about an AP student who's got A's and B's, doing everything, and they're functioning well, and their parents are the ones that are a mess? Or are we talking about the kid who's, did a tour in juvenile hall and he's the graffiti master and like that's stuff that we will consider for sure. So the related codes for the children's interviews for us, Family Code 3180, is that we have the duty to assess the needs and interests of the child involved in the controversy, and we're entitled to interview the child. So we get a lot of pushback from parents. Sometimes they think, oh, it's just a suggestion. So then what happens? You all know, we say, oh, they refuse to have the child. So then they go to court, and then the court orders it, and they come back. So sometimes that is a tactic that somebody's using to delay the process. Family Code 3042 is talking about the kids that are 14 and older. If they want to be heard, one of the avenues for them to be heard is through us, because we're the experts, right? The judge in the black robe doesn't necessarily want to be interviewing children, unless they're really good at child development and they've been doing this a long time and they know what they're doing too, then that's up to them. But this is just an alternative, is if they want to be heard. So if the parents in mediation say, well, Johnny wants to be heard, we got to interview him.
Oh, you have to?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have to.
If one or both? If one says it, then you have to, or if both say it?
Just one of them.
Really?
Yeah, if they tell us in session, so-and-so wants to be, and he's 14 or older.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, not the little ones. No.
One that's our
No, I'm referencing 3042, where if the child wants to be heard and they tell us in mediation, that's one of the ways that it comes out, is the parents say he wants to be heard. Okay, we'll schedule it. And then California Rule of Court 5.250, when a child wishes to participate, the court should find a balance between protecting the child and the statutory duty to consider the wishes of the child and the input from the child and the probative value of the child's input. Mm-hmm. So is it in the child's best interest to testify on the stand? Yes or no? So that's all of what comes into play for child interviews. Now this list is going to be much longer. Reasons not to interview a child. Is it a special needs child? I think one of our pet peeves is when the court orders the children to be interviewed and they don't realize that the 7-year-old's autistic. And we're like, oh, how are we going to interview this one? Child in crisis. So we had a case where the child was cutting, got 5150, spent some time in Canyon Ridge, and the mediator didn't interview the child because she's like, this child just got out. Judge ordered, interview the kid. We're like, oh. So we feel like we're causing more harm because there's a reason they're cutting and they're anxious, and then you're going to put them in this really weird situation and make them come talk to this stranger and exacerbate it.
And that's good to know, because I think a lot of lawyers would think just the opposite of this child is crying out for help. You guys help them, you know, you talk to them and then let us know. So
Right.
I don't think a lot of bench officers necessarily assume, I mean, it makes sense now that you're saying
Yeah.
it, but the other way, I think they would probably think you would do more help than harm.
And this is a definite situation where we'd rather talk to the clinician, because even though we're mental health professionals, we are not doing therapy
Right.
at all. We are not practicing clinicians in this setting. So a child in crisis, do we know how to talk to them and be gentle and all that? Yeah. But do we agree with doing it? No, it's not in their best interest. If it's age inappropriate, so I don't want to talk to the 4-year-old, thank you. If they were recently interviewed by CPS or law enforcement, okay, so I have the 3027. Kid was interviewed. Why are you having me interview the kid? Why would I talk to the kid again? Sometimes it's because what CPS is doing is investigating the safety issues, and what the court is wanting to know is what do we want custody and visitation to look like. Mm-hmm. But I'd rather call the social worker who did the investigation and say, hey, what's your sense? And we'll have a conversation, and I could come up with something rather than, oh, let's have this kid interviewed again. Or if law enforcement's involved, definitely not, because they might be doing a forensic interview, and then I'm going to interfere with that. No, I'm not. Again, if there's an investigation or an evaluation generated or pending, I don't want to interfere. So as an evaluator, it would infuriate me for somebody to do a mediation right in the middle of my evaluation, because you just ruined my process, right? Because now the kid is like, oh, I know what's up now, you know? Multiple interviews. So this is their 10th time here. Kid's been interviewed 5 times. They've been interviewed by CPS and mediators. Like, please stop the madness. That is not good. It can place the responsibility or the burden on the child. Mm-hmm. So the parents are like, tell the mediator. And like Dr. Sheeran said earlier, the kid's telling the parents both what they want to hear. And we tell parents that all the time. Look, he's telling you what you want to hear. He's telling you what you want to hear because you guys have put him in that position. Mm-hmm. So you're going to come here, and they get scared when they're telling us, because one of the things we ask them is there anything that you told me that you're worried about your parents knowing? And, well, yeah, I don't want them to know that I really want to live at Dad's house all the time. You're like, oh, great, what am I going to do with that, right? So sometimes you won't see a lot of details in the child interviews that the mediators do because they're trying to protect the child.
Can I just interrupt real quick?
Sure.
One of the things I've found is sometimes kids will go in to mediation and they will say they want to live with mom or dad because they feel like that person may not be terribly well emotionally or physically, and they feel like they need to go take care of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which may not be in their best interest. Yeah.
And is that what the parent intended? They're like, oh, I'm so sad when you're not here. That's a tactic that parents do. And it's terrible. Yes, they do.
Let's not hear this.
Again, if we could get the information from another source, that's what we'd prefer to do. We'd rather talk to the therapist. The temperament of the child is not conducive for an interview. We've had kids do that. They're just, I'm not talking to you. Well, okay. When the parents refuse to avail the child. I mean, it happened. I'm seeing it more often now, to be honest, than I have in the past.
What, that they are available?
They're not availing. They're not bringing. So we're scheduling it, and then they're just not showing up.
It's weird because it's Zoom or whatever.
I changed my mind. Well, they did. The mediators currently have the discretion to do it in person or video, but we hate doing the video because we have a lot of parents listening in, and the kids are like whispering because guess who? Someone's standing outside the door. So interviewing children right now is horrible for us. So it may further expose the child to the parental conflict. And whenever a parent says, you have to talk to her. You have to talk to her. Oh, okay. I'm not talking to you. And now, to your slide. When do we recommend minors counsel?
And I've never seen it on a single recommendation from you guys.
We do. It's very rare. Because, right, we have us, we have the judge, we have the evaluation, so they're pretty bad when they come to you guys. So I got to give you kudos. Kudos on handling those because you're getting the worst of the worst, honestly. So if there's extreme parental conflict with our frequent filers, high conflict, extended history, they've been here a gazillion times, they've seen 12 mediators, kids have been interviewed a dozen times, they've had evaluations, they're always taking turns filing ex partes, and we know that they're the ones causing the distress for the child, then we might say, we're going to recommend minors counsel. Enough with these people. Because we know that the child's in need of advocacy. So the other reason is that more commonly comes up is if there's a medical or mental health disagreement. And I'm so glad you talked about transgender because that's one of the issues that seems to be coming up more often, where one parent is supportive of it. I know, yeah, the 13-year-old, they decided this and I'm on board and we want to do hormone therapy, and he won't let us, right? Mm-hmm. So we are starting to see those kind of disagreements. Sometimes it's just even a mental health treatment that they won't agree to. The child's in, right.
ADHD, I see all the time. I mean, I've got two families going back to court because it's like the kid needs medication. One parent will not sign for it.
That's a perfect one that we would send to minors counsel because we're like, enough, this kid needs help and you two aren't doing it. We need an advocate for this kid. So that's when you'll see it come from us. And then I only put in alienation because Diana kind of mentioned it to me. But the definition is a set of strategies that a parent uses to foster a child's rejection of the other parent. But in my many years of doing this, it's almost always the person who's claiming that they're being alienated, that alienated themselves by their own behavior. So usually we're talking about
Usually you can get both.
Yeah. So usually we're talking about personality disorder people, and they're both doing this. So that's usually what it is. So you won't see my staff. It would be very rare for us to mention alienation in a report unless we're like quoting what one of the parents said. But it's almost always their own behavior that did it. You all know.
Yep.
You deal with these same people. I'm done. Does anyone have any questions? I answered all your questions?
Very good.